welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers, and you are in the bonus feed, where each and every week, whether it be in season or as we are now, if you're listening in linear fashion, in between season 5 and the upcoming season 6, regardless of any of that, here on the bonus feed, we are here for you, our patrons, our supporters, each and every week. And what we're here with, again, as has often been the case for quite a while, is an intentionalized episode of the bonus feed podcast where someone who supports the show at that tier chooses something for us to watch. It could be a match, it could be a movie, or in this case, a full show. And patron Jerry Lynn fan, they chose a show that it does have historical significance. We'll get into the content such as it was of the show, but it is ECW Holiday Hell from December 23rd, 2000, the final ever ECW arena show. They would go on to do several more shows. I believe the last show, this was in Arkansas, the last ever ECW show.
I will touch on that before we get into the review. Yeah.
This is the final proper ECW arena show. And as we'll get into it on the review itself, it's interesting in that the person who uploaded this show on YouTube, they took a little bit of care in putting it together. It starts with a video screen, static screen, saying the show's coming up, from the ECW TV show in that font. And then it has a minute of Joey Styles, most likely from previous week's TV, telling people, get out, buy your tickets, go to the show. And then what we watch, it's not the TV shows from ECW Hardcore TV. It looks like it's a master tape, like the live to tape feed, for lack of a better term, of with multiple camera shots, but not really edited together, no commentary. It's an interesting way to watch this final ECW arena show.
Yeah, like we mentioned, it's available on YouTube as of the time of this recording. This took place at the ECW arena, December 23rd, 2000. Only 1,000 people there, so not an overflow crowd.
Yeah, you could notice like in a lot of the camera shots, you see a lot of people, but off to if you're looking at from the hard cam and then looking right, the right side permanent bleachers, you never even notice usually what those look like. It's just a sea of people. Here, there's multiple empty rows of bleachers, and you can see they're dark brown high school gym style bleachers. It was weird to see.
October 6th of the year 2000, so just a couple months prior to the show we're about to review, the final episode of ECW on TNN aired. It was canceled as WWF Raw joined the station. ECW struggled for months after the cancellation, trying to secure a new television deal. On December 30th, so just a week after the show we're about to review, ECW Hardcore TV aired for the last time. January 7th, 2001, just 2 weeks after this show, the Guilty as Charged pay-per-view happened. That would be the company's last ever pay-per-view. And the promotion's January 13th, 2001 show, so less than a month from the show we're about to review, that took place in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, like you mentioned, and that would prove to be its final event of any kind. Paul Heyman showed up on Raw as the commentator in February of 2001. The company would go into bankruptcy, where the assets were eventually purchased by WWF, WWE, and we've reviewed many of those incarnations of ECW here, not over in the free feed. Shockingly, nobody's requested that over here in the
no.
bonus feed.
It is crazy that final ECW show in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. It's a surreal watch. There's a RF video fan cam of that show, and it's not the normal ECW ring. There's not a ton of ECW branding. If I'm remembering correctly, I believe it was a sold show to a local promoter. That was it was an ECW show, but it just a weird vibe. What a strange sort of just out with a whimper for ECW to go in Pine Bluff, Arkansas.
Well, they're about to go out with a whimper for their last ever ECW arena show. We'll dive into this now into detail. Dave Meltzer, Wrestling Observer Newsletter, reports that The wrestlers were all paid for this show. They were paid with post-dated checks for the following Tuesday, leaving the wrestlers now 6 weeks behind on pay, but with no shows until the pay-per-view on January 7th. The guys who were on nightly deals were paid as if they had worked 4 shows as opposed to 1 show. So we're in big financial trouble here for ECW. And I think the theme, the story of this final ECW arena show is just how thin the roster is at this point at the end of the year 2000. Rob Van Dam is not on this show as he's currently in negotiations with WWF and WCW at this time.
Yeah, because if you remember at this point when WCW was teetering between dying or Eric Bischoff buying the company, the idea as ECW was dying was that Eric Bischoff wanted to relaunch WCW with Joey Styles as the lead commentator, and one of the main baby faces that the company was going to build around was a post-ECW Rob Van Dam.
Jerry Lynn, who was also a big star here, was expected to be WWF bound shortly. So he was already committed to heading to WWF as of the time of this show. And I wonder how many people knew that based on the lack of reaction for his match later. We'll get into it.
There's just lack of reaction in general on this show. It's definitely for the ECW arena. It's noteworthy. We should also note, and we did, I believe, a podcast on the show I'm about to reference over on the free feed several seasons ago. But you and I'm pretty sure we were both there. I know I was. We did not know each other at the time. But the ECW November to Remember 2000 pay-per-view, yep, which took place just about a month prior to this, we reviewed that show. And even that show had more star power than this did. I mean, you had Kid Cash, who had become a big ECW star at that point. New Jack was still in ECW on that show.
Kid Cash is out with an injury for this show.
There you go.
He had broken ribs at this point. New Jack and I believe Swinger was out at a wedding, so there was some other
New Jack and Swinger were out at a wedding together. That sounds like a fun
I don't know if it was together, but I know that Swinger was
I'm choosing to believe that it is.
So
had to entertain myself while and after watching this show.
Whoever uploaded this used "The End" by The Doors as the beginning theme song, which I appreciated.
Very well done.
We go into the show and we've got loud ECW chants as Chilly Willy makes his way out.
Nothing says end stage ECW more than Chilly Willy. And I say that at the beginning of my notes, and then I amend that several times throughout the show because Chilly Willy at least could do a fun brawl and was a little bit over. There are additional people on this show that are more end stage ECW than him.
No, and it was me Wikipediaing so many of these guys to say, what happened to that guy when ECW closed? And Chilly Willy was one of them. Apparently he went into the military after ECW closed, came back from Iraq and got a developmental deal with WWE where he worked in OVW before eventually being cut.
Wow. Yeah, there are so many guys on this show. One of the things I think back to other late stage territories, end stage Continental or AWA or all these different places. And you could almost keep a running tally throughout the show of wow, this guy never latched on anywhere after this. And there are so many guys that either never latched on or swirled the drain for a year or two and then their careers were over. This show's littered with that.
Chilly Willy's opponent is the Blue Boy, who's a non-fat version of the Blue Meanie.
Blue Meanie apparently was the first person in America to discover a experimental test of Ozempic. It's the only way I can explain the change in body style here from Blue Meanie, who's wearing slacks and a blue cutoff shirt, and he is managed by Jasmine St. Clair,
his shoot girlfriend at the time. So.
Yes.
This match is immediately interrupted by Rhino, who gores Meanie, pile drives Chilly Willy. Then Rhino hits a pile driver off the second turnbuckle on Jasmine St. Clair.
Oh my God.
And then he finishes by pile driving the referee off the ring apron through a table.
I would rather have gone off the ring apron through the table than take the pile driver that Jasmine St. Clair took here. I assume it was safe because there was not an obituary after this show, but my God, that was a terrifying spot, terrifying bump, and it will be the first of many man-on-woman violence spots in this show.
That was a theme. Wow.
I felt like there were more of those than wrestlers going through tables on this show. This was a, you think about old, like I remember the Royal Rumble 89, there were like 35 atomic drops on that show. That's what this was here with that particular spot.
It was good to see, Rhino being so over and
yes.
And you think about the success that he had afterward for a guy that,
and continues to have still.
So happy for Rhino.
And he was really one of the last, you could say Kid Cash was probably the last, but Rhino was one of the last ECW success stories doing what they did best at taking a total unknown and making him a killer star guy that was a legitimate like main event guy for quite a while in the company.
ECW World Tag Team Championship. The challengers, the Baldies, taking on the champions, Danny Doring and Roadkill.
This is another sort of temperature check for where was ECW at this point. Your champions, who were actually really over for a while in ECW, but your champions are Danny Doring and Roadkill. Doring was always terrible. He was completely miscast as a babyface here. Roadkill, while the gimmick was ridiculous, Roadkill was not bad, and Roadkill was a guy that ECW fans latched onto and loved. The Baldies, like if there's any more personification,
DeVito and Angel,
DeVito and Angel, and Vic Grimes before he got New Jacked a few times.
Sure,
I guess before and after, but the Baldies were the ultimate, like they were the personification of the TNNization of ECW. Like ECW on TNN was largely a very good show, but those guys just seemed like, and I know they weren't, like they were an ECW thing, but they seemed like a mainstream network's idea of what an ECW wrestler was.
Danny Doring and Roadkill won the tag team championships on December 3rd of 2000. So just 20 days earlier at the Massacre on 34th Street pay-per-view, where they defeated Tony Mamaluke and Little Guido. Doring and Roadkill held the tag team titles until ECW declared bankruptcy on April 4th, 2001. So Doring and Roadkill were the last team to hold the ECW tag team titles, as a trivia note.
And not only were they the last team to hold the ECW tag team titles, I am 99.9% certain that I saw one or both of them wrestle at an MCW show in like Crystal Lake, Illinois, where they brought the ECW tag team title belts with them after ECW died. And they had the belts, not like they were defending, but they had them there with them on the show.
Danny Doring hits his move, the bareback, and I immediately thought of you and how much we hate this move. It's just a terrible, terrible move.
The bareback is so awful. Again, for those that are not initiated, and you are lucky if you're not, it is a reverse stunner. You put your opponent in a hammerlock. That's the additional touch. You put your opponent in a hammerlock while facing them, and then in a hug position, a borderline loving embrace, fall to your knees, and they fall with you and hit their chin on your shoulder, and this is supposed to mean end of match.
We get a hot tag for Roadkill. He runs wild, including a dive off the middle of the top rope, which is always good to see a big man do. Roadkill holds Angel in a wheelbarrow position as Doring comes off the top with a leg drop, and they get the win. Still your tag team champions.
I cannot tell you the shame I felt. I cannot put it in the proper context when I saw that move, and I wrote down, oh, they win with the buggy whip. I
You knew
remembered.
the name?
I
Wow.
remembered the name of this man. I went down with the ship with both ECW and WCW.
As a reminder, there's no commentary on this
No,
on this tape.
we do not have Joey Styles leading us through this. It is no commentary. Yes, they win with the buggy whip. The unexpected highlight of this show was Angel of the Baldies, who is just a really just total nothing wrestler, hitting the Yuya Uemura double overhook suplex. Where the hell did that come from?
And the good God, this roster continues.
Oh God, this is the moment like where I thought Chili Willy was the low point. Like at least I remember it November 2000. There's that crazy brawl, like 3-way tag match, and he was actually really fun in that. Like I really enjoyed him. Here we have Balls Mahoney. That's great. Who doesn't love Balls Mahoney in ECW? Always a good time. His opponent is Bilvis Wesley. That is right. Yes. Bilvis Wesley, who is I can't remember his first name. He was just like a jobber in ECW for a while, and then they gave him an Elvis impersonator gimmick in the year 2000 in not Eastern, but Extreme Championship Wrestling. Bilvis Wesley had a group. This group consisted of the Prodigy Tom Marquez, some unnamed skinny guy that I can only assume was the ghost of Mike Von Erich, and the Prodiget.
Prodiget, yes. That is correct. So everybody loves to sing with AC/DC's "We've Got the Biggest Balls of Them All." This was, the crowd was into this. Balls was in control. He took it to the floor. He beat up that whole crew you talked about. He backdrops the Prodigy into the crowd. Prodigy comes back to interfere, and we get the heat on Balls. Wesley is terrible. He is not a good wrestler.
No, he is not a good wrestler. Visually, imagine C.W. Anderson with a full head of hair. It's basically what he looks like. He has no presence. He has no sense of timing. There's a point where, for no reason, he does like a forward roll kip up. And I can only imagine it's like in training, he discovered like the night before that he could do it. And he was just 100% dead set on finding a spot to do it in the match, even though as a heel here, there was no reason for him to do it. Just a nothing wrestler.
Balls hits everybody with the chair, and then he hits his move, which is like the greetings from Asbury Park. He calls it like something nut related, right? Like
I can't remember.
Nutcracker or whatever clever
it's
balls.
The Nutcracker.
Nutcracker Suite. That's it.
Yes, it's the Nutcracker Suite. I was to say the Thunderballs driver instead of the Thunder Fire driver, but yes, this is the Nutcracker Suite.
I knew I'd get there if we talked through it enough.
Yes,
there we go.
Yes. But feel good about yourself that we had to talk through that, and it was not like the buggy whip that just spilled out of your wrestling-addled brain like it did mine.
My note says, whatever clever Balls name he has for the move. So we got there.
Whatever testicular-themed name. There you go.
And to keep with the theme of this show, he hits one on the Prodiget for good measure as well.
Of course. We're 2 for 2 so far.
Joey Styles and Joel Gertner are in the ring. They do like the TV-style open, where they have their banter.
They do. Joey Styles is like an insult comic here before they roll tape. There's a guy in the crowd who looks like Slim J of Ring of Honor fame, yelling stuff. We can't tell what he's yelling. And then Joey Styles, being Joey Styles, goes on like the most profane, homophobic insult rant to this guy to try to shut him down, and then starts the open.
He leads the crowd in an ECW chant to officially open the show. I assume this is being filmed for like a hardcore TV open.
Yeah, they were still doing well. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if this ever aired because the next episode of Hardcore TV, you said it was a week later, and they were usually a few weeks behind from taping. So
Cyrus comes out to interrupt, and I'm like, hell yes, Don Callis is here as Cyrus representing the network.
Which doesn't exist. So
doesn't exist.
This was such a strange time after they lose TNN, and Cyrus is here like doing the network gimmick, but he doesn't say the network, and he's not wearing the
TNN badges anymore.
TNN credential that he would wear, but he's here basically as the representative of Jerry Lynn. He's here to shut down Joel Gertner's Open.
Jerry Lynn comes out and gets a "You sold out" chant. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, he's headed to the WWF. But also he's aligned with Cyrus here, so it makes sense from a storyline perspective as well.
It does. Like, one of the other themes for this show is like a lot of the stuff that's happening just feels really half-hearted. Like the crowd chanting "You sold out" at Jerry Lynn, it feels half-hearted. Jerry Lynn out here as a heel who hates the fans feels half-hearted. Like it feels like this is like an ECW arena fan convention. Everyone showed up and they're here to do all the things you do. You got all the derogatory chants at the women, that you sold out, all those sorts of things. But it feels more, I mentioned this to you right before we started recording, like it feels more like one of those hardcore homecoming shows that Shane Douglas put on like around the same time as the ECW one night stand shows, more than an actual ECW show where like these people are doing this organically. Like all the old friends got together and they're all sitting in their same seats and they're doing the chants they've been doing since 1994, but it doesn't feel like they actually believe or mean any of it.
His opponent is Spike Dudley. All Jerry early, trading cradles and roll-ups, lots of stalling, but crowd's having fun. It wasn't Larry Zbyszko-esque stalling. It was actually like some semi-entertaining. Cyrus attacks Spike on the outside, and Jerry starts
with
working
a
him
big
over.
boot. He hits like like they do like a chase thing around the ring, and then around the corner is Don Callis, and he hits like a Yakuza kick, a Masahiro Chono style. I did not expect that.
Inside, Spike hits a chair shot off the top rope to the head of Jerry Lynn. Cyrus breaks up the pin attempt. Spike hits Cyrus with the acid drop, his finisher, and then he turns around into a cradle pile driver by Jerry Lynn, and Jerry Lynn gets the pin.
Yeah, this was like,
but not a lot of heat at all.
No, not a lot of heat. You could tell Spike was really hurting. He had a huge leg brace on his right leg. He was powering through it, but you could tell he was hurting. Jerry Lynn, I love Jerry Lynn. This is a terrible role for him. Jerry Lynn is the cowardly heel. Like, obviously, this is so much smaller scale, but like, it just made me think of heel Steve Austin in the WWF. Like, no one wanted to see this version of Jerry Lynn at all. Again, it just felt like he was half doing it. The crowd was half doing it. And yeah, for like two true ECW guys, there was no more heat during this match than there was for like the Bilvis Wesley match right before.
C.W. Anderson versus Super Crazy. Super Crazy returned to ECW here, even though his father died the night before this show.
Jesus.
Unbelievable.
Wow. Unbelievable dedication to a company who, like you said, finances were in trouble. Guys, hadn't been getting paid. You notice right away, Super Crazy is mega over. More than anyone else so far on the show. Like, you can never, like, you can't overstate how over Super Crazy and Tajiri got each other.
Yeah. When
they first came into ECW and, had the series that they had, and then sort of interspersed throughout the rest of the company, those guys were so over, and because they were great wrestlers and they embraced, putting the extreme into it while still doing the type of wrestling they did. And Crazy is just, it's one of those guys like you don't think about a whole lot, and then you go back and watch, like, God damn, the opening of this match, he is so great, hitting so many things in succession. It looks so smooth. Man, he was awesome.
Yeah, he was tremendous, doing super crazy things here that, I had totally, it's like I'm watching him do all these things, and it's like, oh, I remember Super Crazy doing all those things, and he's so great at it. It was fun to watch it again. Anderson got busted open by a chair shot. I'm watching Super Crazy do the 10 punch in the corner where the crowd counts along in Spanish. I'm shocked that someone hasn't brought that back. That's a great spot. People love that spot.
So fun. Like the whole, like just watching Crazy here, I would make the argument, and maybe people disagree with me. I would make the argument that outside of Rey Mysterio, no luchador has ever adapted so well to an American promotion that they became a regular in than Super Crazy. Like he totally adapted to the cadence of American wrestling, the style of ECW. Just tremendous stuff.
I'll throw Juventud Guerrera in that mix too, I think.
I would agree to an extent, but Juvi was still prone to like get lost, even during the best of times, like get lost in matches, get lost in like matches where he wasn't against another luchador. Whereas Super Crazy looked great regardless, whether he was in there with somebody he'd wrestled a dozen times in Mexico before, or in there with just a random dude like C.W. Anderson.
Crazy misses a top rope moonsault, and Anderson follows this up by putting him in the most anticlimactic armbar you've ever seen for a submission victory.
So C.W. Anderson is a guy that, like we've talked about before, you know, we do this podcast and there's guys that we didn't think much of and then, or just hadn't thought much about or hadn't seen much of. They're a little before our time. If you're listening, you all know who those people are. And then we're like, oh my God, they were great. C.W. Anderson is a guy who in late stage ECW, I was a big fan of. And the more I've seen of him as time goes by after, the more I realized he was not a very good wrestler.
No.
He was doing this Anderson style, like this, not Anderson style, legitimately, literally an Anderson cosplay, but like didn't get like what actually made any of that work. And not to the level of like a Bilvis Wesley where he just didn't know where to put stuff, but there's just weird things throughout this match. Not the armbar that ends it, but one earlier where like he hits a slam, he puts an armbar on for like a nanosecond and then switches to something else. And this isn't like Zack Sabre Jr. style transitioning. Like it was just, he did this and he goes, oh, I guess I don't want to do this now. Just weird. And he was getting a massive push in ECW at this point. He had the feud with Tommy Dreamer where he beat Dreamer. We see him all over this show. It's one of the things that like ECW, obviously for a million reasons, was already on the downturn. But one of the things that didn't help was guys like C.W. Anderson who were boring and just not good getting massive pushes.
Yeah, and it's like you watch him again, and it's like, no, we love the spine buster because it makes us think of Arn Anderson.
Yes.
We like that. There's some things we liked that he did, but it's only because it reminded us of other things we actually liked.
Yes.
And he just has such a lack of intensity that like
that's a great call.
On the rewatch, it's just like, man, here's a guy who's just missing the extra gear to be more believable, to pull you in more, make you care. You just didn't care when he was out there.
No, he was the idea of him was much better than the actual him.
This group, Easy Money with Julio De Niro, Chris Hamrick, and Elektra come out.
I'm just going to get this out right away. I do not know why. I was a huge Julio De Niro fan. I had heard about him on the indies.
Yep.
And then like I was convinced because I believe he came through this. We'll see Joey Matthews or Christian Matthews and Joey Matthews and Christian York. We see them later on.
The Naturals?
Yes. No, that's not the Naturals. That's Andy Douglas and Jay Stevens. I know there's a universe where they're all the same person, and they're
all the same person.
Totally okay to think that. I actually think the Naturals are much more. I was huge fans of those guys too. They came through, I believe, the Omega Matt Hardy system, the Hardy Brothers system, and like I was convinced that Julio De Niro and the Not Naturals that you just referenced were going to be huge stars. We had Chris Hamrick, who was a favorite of this podcast for taking that insane bump in the match against the 1-2-3 Kid on that episode of Superstars that we watched.
And our viral GIF.
Yes. Over 1 million views for that GIF.
We're running up on 4 million views of that GIF.
If we even got 4 million pennies for that would have been tremendous. It's not even Spotify level monetization off of that. But that whole crew with Easy Money, who had such an odd, short career trajectory. He popped up out of the middle of nowhere as part of this group in late stage ECW, as like this disgusting, smarmy, almost like a Jimmy Del Rey type guy without that level of charisma heel at the end of ECW. ECW dies. And then in the last month of WCW, as we've chronicled on this podcast, he shows up and he gets mega over as this innovative, high-flying babyface Jason Jett wearing the same disgusting gear, but WCW fans embraced it and loved him. He was the last organic WCW star to occur. And then that happened, and then he just really disappeared. He maybe appeared on like a TNA show or two at the beginning, but disappeared.
I feel like Easy Money was a few years too late and a few years too early from having a chance to be successful.
It's a very good point. 100%. Like if he would have come along in like 98, 99 ECW, he's one of the few guys of late stage ECW that had enough raw potential that he could have been something. And then he's the type of guy, if he came a few years later when TNA was more fully formed with an X division, or
the indies were peaking, right?
Yeah.
And like you had
Ring of Honor.
Like he was just in the worst period for him. He just missed it on both ends. Yeah, it's just a bummer because he was great in those WCW matches, and he had a few great ECW matches as well. But I'm glad you mentioned the gear. Still gross. He had a bow tie and a cowboy hat on with that gross gear, made it even grosser.
And suspenders, more of like a fedora, the suspenders, the bow tie, and then the short tights with the rubber stirrups. That go not over the short tights, but go inside of the short tights.
It's gross.
Like, this is it's uncomfortable and unpleasant.
His opponent is Nova, and I don't know if you're a big Nova fan, Adam, but he's a 0 for me.
Nova was a guy that I was sort of agnostic about, and the more that time has gone by, my God, was Nova a terrible professional wrestler whose only claim to fame was just ripping off other people's moves and trying to make it as though they're his own. And then didn't he have a run as like an office guy in the WWF for a while?
He did.
Not many people thought that highly of him. He is horrible in this match. Like when you think of like modern times where you go to an indie show and you see someone in like the second match who's trying to do a high level lucha and it just looks terrible. That is Nova, who was around for quite a while.
He's deep in his run. He is deep in his run. And I'm watching this match and I'm like, what is it that's driving me nuts? And I thought about it. It's like, Nova was taking an extra beat to do every single one of his moves, and that made it feel so clunky, and not in a like everything has to be smooth way. We don't we don't necessarily always like that, but when you don't have aggression and you're just off time and you're doing the move that's a step behind, it's noticeable, and it was just that extra beat was driving me nuts.
He did not have like the wrestling mind nor the athleticism to do the sequences that he was trying to do. And there's few things that work less than that. There's one spot where like he does this like almost capoeira style flip out of something, but it looks so bad. And to your point, like he waits a second or two before he does it, like in the middle of the sequence, and it just like you just try for like, what is this? Is this a counter? Is this him trying to do an offensive move? Is it an evasion? And Easy Money just has to stand there. Easy Money is doing like cool, innovative stuff, but he's doing it like timed well. Like it's funny because Nova's the veteran here.
Right. Hamrick's on the apron and he does an ear clap to Nova. Nova turns around and gets hit with a buckshot lariat by Easy Money. And then Nova rolls out to the floor. He's hurt. He's got an ear injury.
Like legit, it looks like the whole side of his face is red. Like,
so I looked this up. He had a legit ear injury coming into this match.
Oh, okay.
So they wanted to do an angle. They had to do an angle because he might have needed surgery on the ear. And if he needed surgery, he was going to be out 6 weeks. So he was getting examined on January 4th. So the injury was the injury actually happened back at the pay-per-view when Elektra slapped him in the ear and actually legit injured him there. So they did this fake injury to explain the real injury. He gets back in the ring. The referee does an injury stoppage as he's bleeding from the ear, and he gets help to the back.
Is what we're seeing on this show with all these spots of man on woman violence, like, is that a reaction to Elektra injuring Nova on a previous show? Like, I can't think of any other reason why they went so hard into this. It was very, and I know we're looking at 2000 ECW through 2024 glasses, but even for ECW, the number of those spots was excessive here. But yeah, this was not very good. It immediately leads into, like you said, the angle where he gets taken out, and this becomes a 3-on-3 match with Tommy Dreamer, Joey Matthews, and Christian York, who are making the save for Nova against this trio of Confederate Currency, Chris Hamrick, Julio De Niro, and Easy Money.
Yes, my notes do say the guys that look like the Naturals. That's why I made that joke earlier. They make a comeback, take out the Easy Money crew. This match went on for a long time.
It did. And it's like, there's only one, like, it's very clear why this match happened. They were very high on Mathis and York.
Yes.
The ECW fans did not buy into them. They were too much of the pretty boys. They were too much of like high flyers. Not that ECW fans don't like that, but they did not feel like ECW style high flyers. Almost like the reaction to the Dynamic Dudes in WCW in 1989. Yeah. It was very similar to that. And so they were put with Tommy Dreamer. So it was basically, well, fans aren't going to boo Tommy Dreamer, and maybe by association with Dreamer, they'll start to accept these guys as their own.
Elektra flashes some boob to distract him, but they give her a double power bomb anyway.
Of course.
More violence on women, and then we get planches to the floor. In the ring, Dreamer has a half crab on Hamrick, who's tapping, but there's no referee. And your boy C.W. Anderson hits the ring and spinebusters Dreamer. Money with a top rope moonsault onto Dreamer, and he gets the pin.
So a few things about this match. One, again, way too much C.W. Anderson. And then, like, what they did in late stage ECW, it was always new guy who isn't over, but we want to give him a push. We want him to get in the main event scene. Program him with Tommy Dreamer, and then he beats Tommy Dreamer, and then he'll be seen as a main eventer. It's what they did with Just Incredible, and it largely worked, even if people didn't necessarily buy Just Incredible as the greatest world champion ever. It got Justin up to that level at least. But then they just kept trying to do it. They did it with C.W. Anderson. They did it here with Easy Money, but it was so transparent that, like, it didn't make you think of those guys as like a top guy. It was just, oh, another guy that Dreamer lost to.
2 out of 3 falls. The FBI, being the Tony Mamaluke, Little Guido, and Big Sal vintage, taking on Mikey Whipwreck and Yoshihiro Tajiri.
I was so excited when I saw this come up on Cage Match, when I was looking what was going to be on this show. These guys had some awesome matches. To me, like, they were the highlight of the end of ECW. The Unholy Alliance, or whatever they called it, Mikey Whipwreck and Tajiri with James Mitchell, who isn't here, the Sinister Minister, with him. They had such great, like, hilarious backstage vignettes leading to them being a tag team. And then awesome matches as a team. I remember at Hammerstein, the tag team tournament, they had an incredible match with each other. And then this was by far the best version of the FBI. So looking at this show on paper, it's like, oh my God, okay, we finally have something to sink our teeth into.
Both teams have moments of double teaming. They're showing both teams working well with each other. And Mikey tries a top rope double stunner, but the FBI counter into double arm bars. Tajiri's in the ring. He gets caught in an armbar, and the FBI win the first fall via submission.
This first fall was super fun. It's basically
fun. Yeah.
No tags, tornado style. And like we always talk about, like, the modern tag team style in the United States. People trace it back to the Young Bucks, and you can trace it back further to the Motor City Machine Guns, and then you talk about the Machine Guns, and you trace it back to the guys that they really drew so much inspiration from, like Ikuto Hidaka and Minoru Fujita. I would make the argument that in the U.S., the style that we see in tag team wrestling now, you could trace it back to what Tajiri and Mikey Whipwreck were doing in these matches with FBI and other guys in the late 90s, early 2000s. Like, they were doing so many different innovative things, one after the other. Boom, 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 boom. And maybe not with quite the speed and precision that you'd see in a modern Young Bucks match or a Lucha Brothers match, but it was really a similar style. And like, I can't think of anyone else who was doing that in the US, in the year 2000.
No, there was no place for tag team wrestling in the WWE. There was no WCW was struggling. So you had this is where this in the Indies was where tag team innovation was happening, and the creativity. You could see that like they put in so much time into the creativity that they were trying to put on display here. It's great.
And for what was a thrown together team, like if you would have said in 1998 or early 1999 that the clean cut blue and white tights Yoshihiro Tajiri and disheveled Dungeons and Dragons t-shirt wearing Mikey Whipwreck would get thrown together and would be the most exciting team in the United States, like no one would have thought it. Like they just immediately gelled so well.
No, there's a curated list of Tajiri matches that some patron has to request because there's a guy we need to talk more about. Like he had such a great run at a time where it's like he would have gotten more of his flowers if it was just a little bit later. So yeah, we need a list.
Well, and think about him in the WWF too, like one of the
Super
only
successful
Japanese wrestlers that, like, despite everything that was thrown his way, got over coming over from ECW and had in the WWE system so many awesome, like fun 4, 5, 6 minute TV matches, and then was a tremendous comedy character with Regal for so long. Just had carved out a great career.
Yeah, and then when asked to bust out a 15-minute cruiserweight championship match on a pay-per-view, he would crush it for something that the WWEF struggled with from the late 90s on until you had this group of the Tajiris and the Hardys and the other folks in that
Tajiri Ray match.
Yeah.
It was tremendous. And like, you never had a pay-per-view cruiserweight title opener on a WWF show that like the crowd bought into and was invested in. Like they pulled that off.
Fall number 2 with no rest period. We get Tajiri and Mikey fighting back. I know innovative double team moves here, and they do a double wheelbarrow into face first, planting him on the mat and getting the pin. A quick second fall, all Mikey and Tajiri.
Very quick second fall. This is at the point where I'm like, this feels pacing wise so much more like a 2 out of 3 falls lucha tag match than it does anything from the United States, even though there's no one here that's from Mexico, no one that you categorize as a luchador. That finish of the first fall with the double armbar and the double tap out, totally the type of thing you would have seen in like mid-90s lucha. Then here, that quick second fall, just very unique for an American show.
Tajiri was awesome in this third fall. He was so great. Tremendous strikes, grappling, transitions, submission holds. He was a tour de force in this third fall. And he goes to blow mist at Guido, but he ducks, and the ref gets blinded by the mist. Big Sal comes in, and he's like the 500-pound guy. He gets up on the ropes, and he squashes Mikey with a bonsai drop. Dare I say, a second rope northern exposure?
An Italian exposure, if you will. This was the highlight of the show for me. What was the move earlier that you said you knew immediately I would have a reaction to? This was
the bareback.
The bareback. This was redemption for the bareback. Thankfully, we also did not have a top rope sunset flip on this show. But yes, this was good stuff. And it was one of the things that ECW was great at till the end, was having a guy like Sally Graziano who could not wrestle a match, but you could use him in a situation like this. And he was such a fun addition to the the act of the FBI at this point, where there's just two super talented little guys, and then you got this guy lurking on the outside.
Tajiri hits a brainbuster on Mama Luke. Guido covers the squashed Mikey. At the same time, Tajiri covers Mama Luke. Two referees run down, each of them counting the pin attempt. They both count 3. Both teams' hands are raised. Then the two referees fight, and Tajiri puts a wacky submission as the original referee comes to, clears his eyes, sees the submission, and deems Tajiri and Mikey are your winners.
This finish was a little too ECW for ECW. It was referee Mike Keener and then heel referee Danny Daniels, who would go on to main event the first IWA Mid-South show I ever went to, defeating Chris Hero in a cage match, and then start AAW and do all these things. Here he's a heel referee. Like, just, we go from the two referees arguing to just doing wrestling spots. Like, the crowd did not know what to make of it. They did not react to it at all. It was just a really odd sequence. But then, like you said, Tajiri gets a very Zack Sabre Jr. style submission on to get the win. By far the best thing on this show to this point. Super fun. I still don't think it was the level of the matches they had at Hammerstein, but on this show, great, and just such a window into a show. Yeah. Oh yeah, and a window in a style of wrestling that we're not going to see for several more years.
The main event is for the ECW World Championship. The challenger, Justin Credible, with Francine, against the champion, Steve Corino, with Jack Victory. Corino comes out with no belt on. Jack Victory will be tied to Francine via bull rope. And the match is about to start when we hear the opening notes to Metallica's Enter Sandman. Oh yes, the Sandman himself comes out wearing the ECW title, drinking a beer, smoking a cigarette. We get the full Sandman entrance.
And the real Sandman entrance. This is not the dubbed WWE Network version. We get the real Sandman entrance, which on this show, we needed something like that in terms of excitement level. Do you have any idea? I have no recollection. Again, I was watching every week till the bitter end. I have no recollection of this story of Sandman not being the champion, but having the belt. I don't know what we're doing here.
This was a stolen belt story.
Always great. We've talked about that recently, how great the stolen belt story is. I say that tongue planted firmly in cheek.
So this is now going to be a 3-way dance as Sandman runs wild on everybody. Credible and Corino are fighting in the crowd. Sandman puts some chairs in the ring to hold up a guardrail. So the guardrail's elevated off the mat, suspended
6
by chairs.
3 chairs on each side. This is a full section of guardrail. These spots always terrified me.
Sandman superplexes Corino onto the guardrail in the ring. Credible tries to steal the pin, but gets a 2 count. A breeze apparently came into the ring and busted Steve Corino wide open.
Yes, this is so Steve. Like, people joke about John Moxley bleeding all the time. No. Steve Corino's scar tissue had scar tissue. I have no objectivity when it comes to Corino. He was my favorite wrestler in the world in '99, going into 2000. So fun. I remember at November when he won the belt. We were in like the second level of the Odeum. I think we're like the first row of the second level. There was like a guardrail in front of us. I jumped the guardrail of this row and then ran down. I was like the Ron Simmons kid in Baltimore in 1992. That was me when Corino won the belt in November.
Credible is hit with a cane by Sandman, turns around into a neckbreaker from Corino, and Justin Credible is pinned.
False. That is the old school expulsion, the finisher of Steve Corino, which was a neckbreaker. It was a reverse. What is that? Now I can't remember the Matt Hardy move. What's Matt Hardy's finisher?
The twist of fate.
It's a reverse twist of fate. That's what it is, from the neckbreaker position instead of the cutter position.
He's eliminated because it's a 3-way dance, which is the proper usage of a term, 3-way dance. Sandman starts by throwing chairs into the ring to start a chair pile. and the fans respond by throwing all of their chairs into the ring. This has to be the GIF, right, for this week's.
It absolutely is. This is insane. This has happened in the ECW arena before. I had completely forgotten that this happened. This was not like a planted thing. It is the perfect way for the ECW arena as far as being ECW to go out. This is wild. It is chaotic. Hundreds of chairs are thrown into the ring. The referee, who I believe is Jim Molyneux for this match, is in the corner, cowering, covering his head, and it'll 15, 20 seconds go by, and there's a little bit of an ebb in the dozens of chairs that are getting thrown in at any given time. So he'll get up out of his crouch, he'll start to go to the middle of the ring, and then a bunch more chairs go in, and so he's got to take cover. Meanwhile, Sandman and Corino are on the floor, chairs are flying. Sandman does not even notice that this is happening. He's, I'm sure, so loaded he has no idea. But the chairs it is a hill of chairs. They are piled upon piled.
Dave Meltzer, Wrestling Observer Newsletter, reports, this show is most notable for trying to duplicate the chair throwing incident of 5 years ago, as Sandman told the crowd to throw chairs in the ring. At first, people didn't. Then, dozens of them came flying in the ring with security doing nothing about it.
Nothing.
Just like when Terry Funk encouraged it years ago, which made a visual that has been a classic on the ECW Open. And some thought that this version was terribly negligent by the promotion because people, such as fans at ringside, could have gotten hurt. And others thought that this sequence made the entire show.
Oh, it did. This, other than the tag title match, this saved the show. Because the best thing about this is, I would argue, it's not a hill I'll die on, but I would argue Sandman is a great professional wrestler. Sandman he's not a good wrestler. He's terrible, but he is the greatest Sandman that could ever exist. And seeing the Sandman in this sea of chairs, you cannot find a inch of actual mat to stand on. Seeing him flail and flop around in Sandman fashion is the best thing you've ever seen in your entire life.
Sandman DDTs Corino on the giant pile of chairs. Victory beats up the ref to stop the count.
It's the best. That's what I want out of ECW. We don't need pull the ref out or ring the bell and his dumb stuff that you see with the House of Torture. Just beat the hell out of the ref to stop the count.
Sandman does a flip off the top and crashes and burns onto the chairs. Corino nails Sandman with a cowbell, and Steve Corino gets the pin. After the match, Sandman attacks everybody with the cane, celebrates with the beer and Corino's belt still, and Corino leaves as champion. Sandman celebrates. Everyone says goodbye for the last time to the ECW arena.
There was also, as this was all happening to close it out, Sandman is standing there looking out to the crowd, and a fan throws a chair into the ring at the Sandman. And Sandman is legit pissed and points the guy out to Atlas Security, wants him thrown out. One last little moment of chaos here to send the ECW arena home.
We talked about our favorite thing on the show already. Is there a worse thing on the show for you?
I mean, the macro is just all the guys that weren't at a level to be on the show that were on this show. I mean, the micro is everything about the presentation and performance of Bilvis Wesley.
Bilvis Wesley, that is the correct answer, yes. No, this was this is a show I had never sat down to watch, so glad I got to relive the final ECW Arena show. So thank you to Jerry Lynn Fan for doing what we do here in the Patreon, and that's taking us through to blind spots where I know I had not seen. So thank you very much for that. If you want to get in on a curated list, I'm going to let you in behind the curtain. The number of curated lists or the number of Patreon requests has never been lower. The queue is near empty. We need to fill it up. We need more requests. So please, now's your if you've been thinking about it, now's the time. It will get in quickly. Bump yourself up to that next tier. Be the randomizer. Send us your request. You fill out the form as long as it's over 10 years old. We will watch it. You bump yourself back down and continue to get all this great bonus content. But give it a shot. We are. If you're like, hey, I've got 3 Tajiri matches you should see, give us that list. If you've got other things that a show, a match, anything you want us to see, go ahead and bump yourself up. Be the randomizer. We take requests. We're waiting to hear yours. And with that, we are going to wrap it up and we're going to call it a podcast. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. We should also just mention if you're not aware, as a patron, you get access to these shows, these bonus feed shows, as a video podcast, a YouTube link just for you, so you can see my snazzy ECW vintage shirt. That's a selling point, I guess, of checking out the YouTube. But yes, thank you, Jerry Lynn fan. This was one of those shows where, again, I wouldn't call it a great show. Don't need to go back and watch it again, but I feel like as someone who was so obsessed with ECW for so long, this was extremely necessary and fascinating to go back and watch in full. That's why we like to do this podcast. So yeah, great stuff, fun times. And yeah, I guess we'll see what either the intentionalizer or the randomizer has for us on the next show.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening. We'll talk to you again next time.